Hello wonderful human beings, and welcome back to another small business vlog. This is vlog 3, I think, and today I just wanted to yap with you guys. I'm in a Waymo right now and I have about 20 minutes left on this ride, so I figured we'd just chat and catch up. There's a lot going on in the matcha world right now. We're gonna be talking about the matcha shortage and what's going on with that, the tariffs that are impacting imports from Japan and how that will be impacting matcha as a result. And then we'll also talk about why it's a blessing and a curse to be sold out of product, especially as it applies to matcha. There's not too much going on right now because we have just sold out of all of our stock at the moment and we're waiting on new matcha, so I'll start another episode when we start prepping all of that material to be shipped out and all of that again. But for now, this week, I have a little bit of a quieter week in terms of froth stuff, which is perfect because I'm actually going to New York for some personal family stuff. And so I thought, what better time than now to chat and yap a little bit. Let's start with the matcha shortage. I'm sure you guys are all aware. People have just been circulating posts online about the fact that there is a matcha shortage. And there's definitely some truth to that, but I think we can dive in a little deeper. Essentially, the issue that we're seeing right now is that so many people are suddenly into matcha. And I think what a lot of people don't understand about matcha is that it actually takes a lot of time to process. As I'm sure you guys know if you've downloaded my free matcha ebook guide, the matcha harvest happens once a year, and every harvest after that, the quality starts to degrade, which is why ceremonial or first flush, first harvest matcha is only harvested once. And then every time you harvest after that, the quality, the flavor, the nutrients even tend to start degrading because you're reaping from the same soil over and over. I think the same would apply for any plant. Basically, the first harvest is always going to be the most rich. After growing and harvesting, it also takes quite a bit of time to process the matcha because the difference between matcha and other tea is the way that it's processed. So the plant that is matcha is actually the same plant that black tea, Earl Grey tea, jasmine tea, and green tea come from. And as a matcha brand owner, what you kind of have to do is forecast into the next year to think about how much you might need. Because if you, let's say, buy a certain quantity of matcha and you sell it all out, that particular variety of matcha might be gone for the year. It just depends on the size of the farm, how much is available that year. So many factors go into what's available. If it's a blend, it's definitely much easier. I've talked about this part a lot on TikTok, but a lot of what's available easily on the internet, if you just want to white label or kind of like remarket matcha that's out there already through like a third party, it's not super high quality, and there's a lot of it, so it does make things a little bit easier. The only tricky part is then basically you're selling the same stuff that a lot of other popular mainstream brands are selling. I can't tell you how many sources I've accidentally found as I was doing my own research, initially thinking that that was the way to go. I mean, it was a struggle to find matcha that I really loved, but it was definitely worth the effort because now as a result I have something that is so amazing, and it's not something that another brand owner could just easily go on the internet and try and buy and resell. You know what I mean, Garbanzo bean? All these things about matcha and what goes into producing and growing matcha makes it difficult, and is also part of the reason why it's really hard for farmers to keep up with this sudden increase in demand and popularity of matcha because everyone wants more and more and more. And I do feel like people are kind of starting to learn a little bit more about what good matcha is. So they're not just wanting like your average Starbucks matcha, they want the good stuff. But that unfortunately means that these farmers suddenly have to find matcha and pull it out of nowhere because their harvest for the year is already committed to other people. You just can't make it appear out of nowhere. So when my brand sold out of matcha last year, we were quiet for about 4 or 5 months because there's just no way that we could suddenly make that matcha appear out of nowhere, as much as we wish that that would have been possible. And it really sucked because it really hurt the traction of our brand growth, but it's just something that we weren't willing to compromise on. We didn't want to just start selling shitty matcha just to keep the momentum up. So essentially, it's a lot of people suddenly interested in the matcha industry, a lot of consumers demanding more and more matcha, but the same limitations when it comes to growing and producing the matcha. Not only that, but a lot of the farmers actually really struggle because there's a man watching me vlog from the car next door. Another difficulty, and something that I've heard from farmers directly, is that because so many of these farms are generational family-owned farms, it's difficult for them to kind of keep the business going because a lot of the younger generations are not interested in becoming farmers. Some of these farms have retired because they just couldn't find anyone to continue the legacy, which means that there are also fewer and fewer farms doing things the right way. And because there's an increased interest all of a sudden in matcha, a lot of these random people are coming around trying to buy their product and trying to lowball them too and get as much out of them as they can. And I think it really puts the farmers in a bad position because they need to make money. There's a lot of things at play play, but the matcha shortage is definitely real. I think social media has contributed to it a lot. There's a lot of people who are really into matcha because it's trendy, and definitely I would say it's not something that I feel like most people should be consuming so much of. I feel like there's this weird unspoken competition these days, the strongest matcha, the most grams of matcha. Like I see cafes that are marketing a 10-gram matcha latte. I'm like, for what? For what reason? So matcha shortage paired with an increase in demand and sudden popularity in matcha, terrible combination. Now let's talk about the tariffs, because it is most definitely impacting Japanese imports. I believe things are being marked up by about like 24% off the top of my head. I could be wrong, but it is definitely impacting me as a matcha business owner, because that means that now the price that I pay to import matcha is going to go up by 25%. And what's really tricky is we're selling a quality product, which means our margins are not that amazing. You know, we're not marking the matcha up a crazy amount because we also want to keep things in a relatively accessible price point. It essentially gives us two options, which is to make very little money or to mark prices up. But it's tough when I feel like we're already competing with these giant corporations that charge very little money. Granted, their product is not amazing, but there's always just that competition of people not understanding matcha and saying, this matcha is so much cheaper, why would I pay for yours? So we're really aiming for the consumer who's kind of educated and appreciates good matcha, because like I always say, you know, the only thing that matters is that you enjoy the matcha you drink. So if you enjoy like a Starbucks matcha or a cheaper matcha, all the better for your bank account. You know what I mean? The way that the tariffs are now impacting me as a brand owner is that I'm having to put up so much money to purchase matcha upfront and to just secure it, because essentially as soon as the news kind of got out, people started trying to fly out matcha from Japan as soon as possible and as much as possible. So all of a sudden there's this competition for matcha that came out of nowhere from people who I don't even know if they are into matcha like that. Like I don't know what their intentions are. So all of a sudden there's this increased competition for the limited availability of matcha that there is, and I'm having to front way more money than I would at once just to kind of make sure that I have enough supply. And also to try and be smart about avoiding potentially some of these tariffs being imposed, right? It may not really impact a bigger company, but as somebody who owns a small business, it definitely makes a huge impact. And again, talking about price and competing with these giant corporations, I think a lot of people need to be understanding of small businesses, especially businesses that are going to be impacted by the tariffs. Like there's just really no other way to respond than to also kind of increase your prices, because our prices and costs have increased too. But I don't know that consumers will want to absorb that cost. So that's kind of the tricky position that we're in. Unfortunately, margins are going to be much smaller. Our projections are going to change quite a bit. Money aside, it's also just been so difficult to source anything. Like I'm talking packing materials. You guys know we were sold out of tins for a really long time. A lot of these businesses just don't even want to bother with importing things anymore because they know it's going to be a pain in the ass and because of the tariffs. So things are looking crazy, and we're not even going to talk about the stock market. Last but certainly not least, let me share why it's both a blessing and a curse to sell out as a small business, specifically a matcha business. If you haven't put it together already, it just takes so much time to restock, and you really lose not only your momentum, but customers when you sell out of matcha. Of course, it's a good thing to sell out. It feels great, but really as a business owner, what I'm trying to do is project months ahead, right? To make sure that I have enough inventory to last me a couple months. When that starts to change and we run out of inventory for the months ahead, it starts to become a scramble of, oh my God, we need to get our hands on more matcha, which, as I mentioned, takes some time. Matcha has become a big part of so many people's daily routines. And personally, I know that if I had to go without matcha for days, let alone months, it would be a terrible feeling. So when we run out of stock, I feel like it's difficult because we're losing our dedicated consumers, the people who love to drink our matcha and have been so gracious to incorporate it into their daily routine. And so that's something that we are now working towards to make sure that we can get ahead on, so we ideally don't ever really sell out for too long. I think on the product side, like with our small collaborations and ceramic bowls, it's inevitable. It's gonna happen because we have a limited quantity. But on the matcha side, we can try and be as prepared as possible just so that that doesn't happen to us, because it's happened once. It's a pretty terrible feeling to be sold out for months at a time with constant questions just like, when is the restock? When is the restock? And at that time, we really didn't know. So that's kind of everything that I wanted to yap about today. By the time you're watching this video, we should have matcha back in stock. We were able to manage working around that pretty quickly this time, even though we sold out faster than we anticipated, because now we just keep an eye on inventory, and as soon as it starts to dip a little lower than we think, we just gotta get back on it and make sure we have matcha ready. Next episode, I'll show you more of the action, and there will be a lot going on. We have so many launches planned for the rest of the year. We just had our meeting this week about it, and I'm so excited. It's all falling together. And if you made it this far, so grateful for your time. And whether or not you've been a Froth customer, I so appreciate your support. This has been such a fun yet humbling experience that I get to share with you guys, and it has completely changed my life in so many ways. Don't forget to download the free matcha ebook guide to learn more about matcha, and you can follow me at Matcha Mommy on Instagram and TikTok, and Froth on Instagram. I'll see you guys in the next one.